Hello everyone, and welcome to the continuation of what I will probably just call the Lara Kincaid playthrough, since I'm such a clever and creative man. In the last episode, we met Lara, who is our protagonist. Prior to the zombie apocalypse, she was a model, and now unfortunately, she's just another struggling survivor. She arrived at the evac shelter to find a gentleman called Mandukes, and our attempt at recruiting him unfortunately failed. Now, we will revisit this in the future. I'm sure we can get him on board with our survivor effort, but for now, he's not our companion. We explored a farm and found a pitchfork and a horse, and then we headed off to loot the nearby town. The horse is nice, of course, but honestly, I've never really used them in the game, and so we probably aren't going to do much with that. Lara found herself fighting her first zombies, and in the end, she had a severe bite wound and was quite injured. However, she did her best to push through the pain and looted a nearby house. Eventually, she retreated to the evac shelter to treat her wounds with the medkits that we found in the first minutes of the game. And yeah, unfortunately, that's about all we did in that first episode. I would like more stuff to happen in each video, but I ultimately play pretty slowly, and when I'm trying to roleplay and write stuff, it's just, it eats up a lot of time. And we'll see how all of this shakes out in the long term, so for now, welcome back and let's get into it. Actually, I should mention, I just had some dental work, so although I don't think I sound very different, you may notice I might sound a little weird. Hopefully that's not a big deal. Now Lara, having just finished treating her bad bite wound, she really wanted to just lay down and go to sleep. The previous days had been absolutely terrible as she had traveled to the evac shelter and did her best to evade the undead. Now, however, she had been confronted with actual combat and severe injury to her own body. She had put down some of the monsters, but she also knew that this was just the beginning. Seeing the dead rise on television had been a lot less terrifying than having one sink its teeth into her arm. Speaking of her arm, it throbbed terribly, bearing the horrific wound from the zombie's bite. She winced in pain. Her body was covered with bruises and cuts from her recent trials. All she wanted to do was drift off to sleep and wake up 6 weeks earlier, back in the familiar comfort of her own home. She even missed her nasty neighbor and the irritating phone calls from her mother, which were just filled with pointless gossip and complaints. All of those little things, these obnoxious things that she had always disliked about her life, well, now she wished desperately for things to go back to the way they had been. As Lara thought about sleep, she realized that there are no beds in the evac shelter. What a stupid design, she thought. People were expected to come to this place and they didn't even have beds. It seemed unlikely that she would be able to build one herself, and so she decided that she would have to drag a mattress from the house that she had previously looted. So off she went, pushing her exhaustion to the back of her mind as she trudged back to town. First things first though, I did start the car that we found in the last episode. My confidence has been a bit wonky lately, and I was worried that I had incorrectly determined that it could run. Thankfully it does actually run, so hooray, I can still remember how to read a vehicle screen, so that's some good news there. Now Lara moved back into the house and looted what little she had left behind. I figured since grabs are still pretty powerful in the game and I was getting pretty wrecked in melee combat, I should probably take the extra clothing to replace anything that gets ripped up. Now on that note, as of this recording, grabs are still pretty powerful, although they have been changed now in vanilla. Now it's actually taken me more than a month to actually get these videos up on the channel, so yeah, grabs are still broken in my game, but they won't be in yours. Anyway, next up was the mattress. I thought, hey, we could just throw this thing in the trunk of the car and take it back to base, no problem. Now unfortunately, turns out the mattress is actually too big for the trunk, or the seat for that matter, or any tile in the car. So I'm not sure how we're going to get that mattress back to base, but we'll figure that out later. For now, Lara turns her attention back to looting. This house is actually a duplex, and she heads next door to grab some things from the other apartment. Now she knows that there are zombies outside, looks like a construction site next door, so she crouches along the windows to close the curtains. Not all of them have curtains, which is definitely an annoyance here. A lot of the stuff here is the same basic house loot that we had already obtained in the last episode, but one thing of note that we do find is a chef knife. Currently we're using the pitchfork as our weapon, but that's definitely not going to last forever, it's already damaged. We have no way of repairing this item currently, and so we're going to need to start planning for what we're going to use after the pitchfork gets into bad condition. The chef knife can actually be used to make knife spears, which sadly might be our only option for a reach weapon. And with that, well, this was the beginning of the zombies breaking through the windows to get at Lara. We have to fight them in the garage. It's really the only place we can retreat to, and I'm still not really comfortable fighting yet. I really should play the game more often, so I'm not quite so terrible. After dispatching several enemies while she's out there, Lara decides to drop her loot in the back of the car. She's still in a great deal of pain, and lugging a heavy backpack around seems to really be draining her energy. As she continues to loot, a few more enemies do unfortunately come through the windows. She tries to kite them around as best she can using the kitchen island to her advantage. The enemies keep clambering over it in that slow, graceless way that all the undead move. She's jabbing furiously with her pitchfork, but her energy has dwindled with the constant pain in her arm. Her limbs feel heavy and her movements are sluggish. It seems that each time she dispatches an enemy and returns her attention to looting, there's another crash, more glass shattering, and another zombie bursting through the window. As their numbers finally dwindle, an overweight zombie man chases her back through the garage. In a panic, Lara stumbles while climbing through the car, and the man is rapidly closing in on her. Suddenly overwhelmed, she flees outside, slamming the garage door behind her to seek refuge in the fresh air. Panting and covered in scratches and cuts from her previous encounter, she collapses in the grass to regain her composure. She lays there and wheezes for a little while. Her trembling hands and exhausted body need a moment. She just needs some time to regain her composure. Unfortunately, in the end, she knows there's no way to avoid this confrontation. She needs to deal with the large man so she can get access to her car and the items that she's already looted. Giving up and running away is simply not an option. After a short break, she heads back inside and honestly very easily dispatches the man. Feeling a bit overwhelmed and concerned about her incredible pain, Lara decides to retreat back to the evac shelter and try to collect her thoughts. She drops off her loot and then walks back to town, realizing she never brought the mattress, which had been the whole point of going there in the first place. Now, unfortunately, the mattress can't be carried alongside the pitchfork, so she drags it through the grass and the mud all the way back to base. Exhausted, she thumps the filthy thing to the floor beside Mandu's. When she finally would be able to sleep, she'll drag it over to her own corner, I guess. For now, though, it could stay there, in case the man wanted to nap while she was doing all of the hard work. Lara was starting to get a little irritated that he just stood there all the time as her own body had been ravaged by combat. Anyway, this seemed like a good time to sort out our base. I wanted to take a look at the various loot that we had obtained, which is generally pretty tough when it's all just in a huge pile on the floor. We'll just say that Lara was feeling a bit overwhelmed from what had truly been a very rough day, and she just wanted to spend some time in the safety of the shelter. Now, this is going to be a bit of a work in progress. Obviously, we're going to expand these piles as we progress through the game. I'm doing this using the Zone Manager tool to just add a bunch of different zone types and then sort out our loot. Now, I mention this specifically because I still meet people on Discord who never use this feature, and for the love of God, the Zone Manager tool is amazing. You should definitely learn how to use it. Honestly, it's one of the best quality of life features this game has ever had in all the years I've been playing. Anyway, I arranged the benches into a sort of U shape because, I don't know, I guess it's just vaguely aesthetically pleasing. Lara will need some way of cooking and reading at night, and at the moment we don't have the materials we need to make a brazier. I just set up some of the most basic zones here: food, drinks, tools, things like that. And I arranged them around where I kind of plan to set up the brazier. I like having a lot of stuff really close. Obviously for crafting makes it a lot easier. Speaking of crafting, we also do not have a table to work on our crafting projects. Apparently the cupboards in the evac shelter can't be dragged around anymore. I don't really know when that change happened. It definitely used to be possible to drag those around, but I never play in the evac shelter, so I really don't know. Now, we're probably going to have to build our own table eventually, which, if I'm being honest, is a bit out of character for Lara. However, she's into tailoring, so she probably does understand the value of having a nice big workspace like a large table for crafting. This was all, however, a brief distraction sorting our loot. We definitely need to head back to town. There's really not much for us to do at the base anyway. Also, because it's not even freaking noon yet, despite the fact that I've been playing for like an hour and a half. Definitely I'm playing a lot slower in this series than I did in my previous Let's Plays. Now, the house to the south of the one that Lara had looted previously seemed like a prime candidate for us to grab some more stuff. She makes her way inside and starts grabbing some loot. Again, it's nothing of serious value, not really, but I'm still in that phase of the game where you basically take everything that you find. Now, the one interesting thing about this house is that unlike the previous, this one has a basement. Now, basements, fun fact, often have more monster density than they probably should. I don't know if the idea is that people were sheltering in their basements or what the idea there is, but it's pretty common to find a house that's completely empty of zombies and then go in the basement and find like 6 of them down there. Basements also had their really good loot spawns nerfed quite a while ago, so a lot of them are pretty empty with nothing of value. There's no reason to go down there. For the record, I'm not really complaining. I think it makes sense to some extent that people would shelter in their basements. Now, I do find the lack of loot a bit annoying. There are a lot of really empty basements, which I find incongruous when compared to the houses above them. So, I as the player know perfectly well that I should not go down in the basement. There's probably nothing down there, it's probably just a bunch of zombies. However, Lara the character, well, Lara is new to the Cataclysm. She heads downstairs thinking she might find something just, so good down there, you never know. Now, unfortunately, we immediately are confronted by a zombie child, and after heading back upstairs, it of course follows us. This is a young boy wearing compression shorts, a clip-on tie, a long underwear top, a wool hoodie, and steel-toe boots. Also known as exactly the clothing that a normal child wears. This is completely normal. Now, Lara loops up through the living room, hoping that the zombie will trip over some of the furniture. She's starting to learn to use those things to her advantage. Unfortunately, it just relentlessly pursues her, driven by that unrelenting hunger. Or okay, I guess our zombies don't eat brains or whatever, but that sentence sounded kind of nice. I have it written in front of me here. It looks pretty good. Now, just as she was circling back towards the basement stairs, another zombie, a police officer, appears from the darkness. It stares at her with those angry, undead eyes and immediately gives her chase. Desperate and trapped in the small study, Lara smashes through a window and retreats outside. The pursuing zombies end up stumbling through the bushes outside as she wields her pitchfork, thrusting it into their flesh to keep them at bay. Now, I personally fumble around like an idiot because I'm starting to remember that I should be dropping my backpack before combat, and up until now I have not done this. I'm not really sure when in the recording I actually start doing that, but it's very important and I'm absolutely a fool for not doing that sooner. Just thought I would explain that. I've been doing a terrible job with combat so far and I feel like it deserves an explanation. I do promise it gets better in the future though. Once I realize I need to drop my backpack, I start doing a lot better. Now eventually Lara does put down the child zombie, but there are still more coming and she has no idea where the police officer disappeared to. Lara gets grabbed again, but she does manage to kill the enemy holding her before she gets another deep bite. Her torso is badly wounded, with ragged red claw marks bleeding slowly against her shirt. She also has the sad status effect, which, yeah, you are not content with your life. Yeah, I get it, Lara, you're a millennial. None of us are content, whatever. Now she heads back and finds the police officer falling over the desk inside the building. She lures it into the bushes and viciously puts the thing down. She's tired of all these freaking zombies and it's only day 1. It once again grabs her, and I personally was getting frustrated with being grabbed over and over again, so I just stood there and let her face tank it. In hindsight, this was a horrible decision, and Lara gets very badly injured as a result. I was just frustrated after playing for a couple hours, and I barely made any progress. I was pretty frustrated. If you've ever watched my old content, you know I'm prone to being very angry and making bad decisions, so yeah, I shouldn't have done this. Now on the plus side, searching the police officer reveals that he actually had an AR-15 on him as well as a full magazine for the weapon. It's actually pretty fantastic to find a 5.56 rifle this early into the game. I had even complained in a recent video about how firearms are becoming increasingly rare, and for that video I had tested police officer drops and got basically completely garbage loot, so I'm genuinely really surprised that we found this. This is honestly a really great drop and we're definitely going to have to work this into our commonly carried equipment. Now the creature also had a first aid kit, which of course we'll add to our pile of medicine back at base. Now Lara is severely injured yet again, and the pain has become it's too much. She can't take it anymore. She drags herself slowly back to the car, sliding into the driver's seat. Blood slicks every surface that she touches, and she slowly realizes she's soaked in her own blood. Even just thinking about this makes her nauseous, and she has to sit still for a moment until she can think clearly again. Slowly, she reaches across and closes the doors of the vehicle and then drives back to base. Lara is too injured to keep looting. She musters the strength to transfer her loot from the car to the evac shelter, but even that task feels sluggish and difficult. When she attempts to lift heavy objects, she's hit with an overwhelming wave of nausea and lightheadedness, which forces her to lean against the car to steady herself. Given the severity of her injuries, it becomes pretty clear that armor should be her next priority. She's a talented seamstress. After all, she probably could stitch something together to protect herself. The more she thinks about that, though, the less it seems like she would do anything with sewing. It seems like it'd be better to find proper armor. She had looted a Kevlar vest previously, and although it's covered in filthy zombie gore, it shouldn't take too much to get it cleaned up. Now, the only armor we've found is the Kevlar vest, a police ballistic vest, a couple motorcycle helmets, and motorcycle boots. Now, the boots don't really matter. Foot protection is not really something you need to be very concerned about in this game, and Lara is already wearing hiking boots, and those are totally fine. There are also some leather pants that I grabbed. I mostly just took those for scrap leather pieces, though they're not really worth wearing. Anyway, Lara heads to the nearby swamp looking for a puddle of water to wash her soiled clothing. As she's walking, she discovers a large, ominous crater in the ground. The massive absence in the soil stretches wide in front of her, its edges jagged and scorched from flame. Uncertain of what caused this level of devastation, Lara hesitates, trapped in a mixture of fear and awe. Perhaps it was best to just stay away from the thing. She continues towards the swamp, but the fear and anxiety are growing inside of her. As she prepares to wash her clothing, Lara's mind wanders back to the news reports prior to the apocalypse. They spoke of grotesque and monstrous insects lurking in areas with a lot of water, specifically in swamps like the one she's standing in. However, to her relief, she sees nothing out of the ordinary. The puddle of water that she found doesn't even seem like swamp water. She had expected a horrendous odor. It would be enough to clean the clothes and seem perfectly fine. She cleans the gore and filth from a motorcycle helmet and the police ballistic vest. Now, I'm not really sure why I chose the ballistic vest over the Kevlar vest. I don't have footage of me comparing them, so yeah, I'm just going to accept that I probably knew what I was doing. While she's at the water, Lara takes the time to wipe the blood from her hands and face. She debates splashing water over her entire body, but even if the water seemed like it was clean, she knew that it wasn't. Only God knew what sort of filthy bacteria was in the water, and she didn't want to spread that all over the wounds on her torso. Wearing the police jacket does require us to lose our leather jacket, and the helmet means removing our scarf, which is, neither of them are a very big loss. Also, wearing the motorcycle helmet, at some point I decide it's not really worth the penalties and I do get rid of it, but for now Lara's going to wear the ugly thing. I'm just going to say that she was really distraught over her injuries and wanted the maximum protection possible, even if it wasn't practical. Now, unfortunately, we don't have any leg protection, and the only one we could really craft are some 2x-shins. Now, these are essentially just wooden boards that you strap onto your legs. They're not ideal. Now, I always thought these were really, really terrible, but looking at them, they don't really seem that bad. Now, the protection they provide is probably worth the negative encumbrance penalties, and we're getting torn up so bad that I'll take basically anything. We'll swap these out for some better leg armor later on, but for now, this is what we're going with. Now, because of the severity of our injuries, I do think it's time that, Lara spends the rest of the day inside. Overwhelmed by severe pain, she endlessly trembles, a constant reminder of her injuries. She collapses onto a nearby bench and attempts to distract herself by reading. Unfortunately, her focus has completely tanked and she's not taking in the information very well. Trying to find anything that could possibly relieve this horrible pain, she searches frantically through her pile of medications. Now, she did find some marijuana earlier, and she does light a joint hoping to ease her nerves, or at the very least help her control her trembling. She had tried weed a few times in her youth, but smoking was a disgusting habit. She thought it tasted funny. Lara also eats a few snacks, trying to do anything that might boost her mood and make her feel normal again. She sits on the bench and once more tries to read the emergency pamphlet from her first aid kit. Her eyes were filled with tears, and the more she thought about her day, the more she felt the anguish tearing at her inside. She found herself rereading the same paragraph over and over. It was impossible to absorb the information in the pamphlet. Desperate for a connection to her old life, Lara checks her phone, hoping desperately for a text or voicemail from her brother. However, there's nothing. Attempting to reach out to him, she is greeted with a simple message displayed on the screen: cellular network not available. She sinks down onto the bench once again and tries reading, but she can't focus. However, as much as Lara wants to collapse and weep herself to sleep, as the player, I still need her to get some work done. The light is fading and I never did set up a brazier or anything, so that's going to be our next goal. Alright, so we quickly hop back over to town and smash a stove to get the materials that we need, and on the way back we get vehicles level 1, which is just so very impressive. We get the brazier crafted and gather wood from the various furniture around the evac shelter. I decide to build a table as well, like I mentioned earlier. It'll give us a big place to put our large crafts and just speed up crafting overall. I did really want to get our first aid to level 1, theoretical level 1, before we started bandaging and treating our wounds for the night. Now this might have been pointless, we might have gotten to practical level 1 even without the theoretical skill, but whatever, Lara really needed a break from combat. In the end, I used the alcohol wipes since they seem to be very low value when it comes to disinfecting bite wounds, but presumably they're good enough for trying to heal overnight. Same thing for the medical gauze, it's pretty crap at stopping a bleeding wound, but it looks like they might be good enough to get a little extra healing while we sleep. Now I probably should have looked in the files to verify this, but it really doesn't matter, it's fine. Lara takes the time to diligently clean and bandage her major wounds. The sheer number of scratches and cuts are a bit overwhelming, making it impossible to tend each one. However, she tries her best, doing what she can with the alcohol swabs and gauze. Consumed with a bone-deep weariness, she crawls onto the filthy mattress that she'd thrown on the floor. It was covered in green streaks from where she had dragged it through the grass, but honestly, she just did not care. Wrapped in the warmth of her blanket with her head on her pillow, the exhaustion finally overwhelms her and she falls immediately to sleep. Unfortunately, as time passes, it became pretty clear that we weren't going to heal very much. Apparently, back in the day, the multiplier on overnight healing was broken, so it applied multiple times. Now, this was fixed pretty recently, so healing overnight is significantly slower than it was like a year or two ago. Still, Lara sleeps very heavily, completely unfazed by Manduke standing there awkwardly on the other side of the room. Despite all the pain and all the hardship, Lara has just survived her first day in the zombie apocalypse. And with that, internet, I think this video draws to a close. I have no idea what I'm going to do for the AI images in this video. Unfortunately, it doesn't do wounds or injuries. A lot of what I talked about here was like her being really roughed up. I'm not sure how much of the AI stuff is going to make it into the video. It is the main gimmick of the series, so I'm going to try to put something interesting together. And just to pad out the art, if there isn't enough of it, here's a picture of a brute that I generated a while back. And here's a smoker zombie as well. I think I had generated some smoker zombies a while back. Those should be interesting. Now, historically, I haven't had very much luck generating zombies. Staple diffusion always seems to mess up the faces, so it's not like my favorite thing in the world. Regardless, though, thank you for watching. I hope you've been enjoying my probably very unimpressive attempt at doing a role play. I'll be back in the near future with more content. Thanks for watching, and of course, I'll see you next time.